Welcome into a special edition of the Yards After College podcast powered by KSLSports.com. I'm your host, Kyle Ireland. You're joining us live on Facebook, YouTube, Periscope. I'm pleased to be joined today by a National Sports Writer of the Year. He's an author of multiple books, as well as the must-read article of the week if you're an NFL fan. That's Peter King's Football Morning in America. He's the one and only Peter King of NBC Sports. Peter, thanks so much for joining me today.
Good to be on with you, Kyle. How are you?
I'm doing well. I had to get you on because we're under a month now until the NFL draft. And you know that Zach Wilson's just been the talk of the NFL for the last week. Well, up until today, at least, because today we had Justin Fields and Mac Jones with their pro days, but we had Zach Wilson's last week. And I wanted to get you on because about a month ago, you had Zach Wilson. You had a conversation with him for your Football Morning in America article. And I guess we can start off there. What was your biggest impression coming away with that conversation that you had with Zach? And, what were some of the things that you kind of took away from him?
Well, I think one of the things that seems pretty admirable about Zach Wilson is that, a year ago, he was in big trouble, basically. He might not be the quarterback of Brigham Young anymore, even though he obviously had been a starter in 2019. But he goes into 2020 and his coaches tell him, you're going to be competing for the starting job. You're not guaranteed anything. He has the sort of crummy end of the year, the bowl game in Hawaii. And he's just, he's trying to do a little bit too much. And I think what we've learned a little bit since then is that, obviously he had surgery for the torn labrum in January of 19. And then beyond that, he breaks a bone in his hand, I think in October. And so honestly, as he told me, never really was right the whole year, and he didn't play very well. So, I think a year ago at this time, nobody was expecting Zach Wilson even to be in the draft, never mind to be the guy who was going to be the second or third player picked in it. So I think now when you look at what Zach Wilson did with himself, he said, look, I'm going to do everything humanly possible to make myself a great player in this off season, and nobody has beaten me out for this job. So obviously, as I wrote a month ago, maybe 7 or 8 times in the course of the off season, he got in his car in Provo and drove, 700 miles or whatever it was, 680 miles to Orange County, California, and he worked with John Beck for a weekend or longer, his quarterback coach. And I think he believes that has been a huge part of, what has happened and how he's gotten better. So I guess my overriding thought about Zach is just that, he saw that he was sort of in crisis. Or that, his career basically was under attack and who knows what was going to happen. And so he has made himself, with the help from his coaches at BYU and obviously from John Beck, he's made himself into what he is today. And I think, Kyle, I think everybody in the NFL is going to have skepticism about a guy who, against a pretty good schedule, was mediocre in 2019, and against a lousy schedule was great in 2020. And probably his big showcase game against Coastal Carolina, he lost. And so everybody might say, well, there's not enough there. We don't want to make another Mitchell Trubisky mistake. where people may see one really good year. But I think I probably, and again, I'm not saying that those people are wrong, but I probably come down more on the side of he's a real talented player who is just reaching sort of the apex of his ability. And, and I wrote about this when I wrote about Zach a month ago, but the throw in the final minute of the game at Coastal Carolina, which he threw 42 yards in the air, just an absolute bullet that was complete, that basically gave them a chance down the stretch. That throw is a throw that many people in the NFL have spoken about with John Beck. And that is a throw. If he didn't have that throw on his resume, I don't want to make too much of it, but that is the kind of throw that if you can make that throw consistently, and who's to say he can, but if you make that throw consistently, you're going to have a long and profitable career in the NFL.
So you've got the tape, obviously, all these games. He's got 3 years or 2.5 years as a starter now. And then you've got his pro day, which everybody was oohing and ahhing about on Friday. You've got his interviews with these teams. You wrote about how even like the Jacksonville Jaguars had multiple calls with him. You take all these things into account. Does the tape rule all? Is it only about the game film when it comes down to it in the end? Is that the most important thing? Or, does his pro day really have that much impact?
I think what you'll find from people who go to pro days is that it's a piece of the puzzle. But I think you got to be really, really careful about overvaluing pro days. I mean, I was thinking about that the other day when, whatever day he had his pro day, and how everybody was going crazy about it. And the only point I was going to make was, I've never heard anybody, 4, 5, 6 years into a really good NFL career, I've never heard people talk about him and say, yep, that's what we saw at his pro day. It isn't that. It's, this is what we saw when we saw him play games, at Brigham Young. So throwing the ball against air is nice, and meeting everybody in the NFL is nice, but what does your game tape say? And for the most part, he had very good game tape in 2020 against mediocre competition.
So there's been a lot of comparisons. I mean, even some of your colleagues at NBC Sports, among others, have made these comparisons to Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, these great players. And you've covered the NFL for a number of decades now. Are those just lofty expectations that are setting Zach up for failure, or is there really something there?
I mean, the throw he made running to his left in his pro day, and the throw that traveled about 56 yards in the air and was dropped absolutely right into a bucket way downfield to his receiver, is a Mahomes type throw. It just is. And I think it's ridiculous to say there's nothing wrong with saying this guy reminds me of Mahomes. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think all of those comparisons have to really be done cautiously, because you could probably find 5 or 6 quarterbacks in college football right now who can, while sprinting out, make beautiful looking throws and fairly accurate throws. But the whole thing is, as you saw the other day with Zach, there's nobody there. There's nobody rushing him. There's no, the great plays that Patrick Mahomes has made, many of them have been under significant heat. And again, I'm not trying to rain on his parade at all. I'm just trying to say that this is why scouting in the NFL, in my opinion, is such a landmine. Because we can all sit here and say, oh my God, Zach has got this incredible future, and look at him and look at some of the throws he made during his season. Look at his pro day. It's fantastic. But, again, the biggest trait, Kyle, that if I were an NFL coach, general manager, scout, I would say I really admire, first of all, I admire how he throws. I admire his athleticism. I admire his ethos that in March of 2020, his career was in extreme jeopardy, and he did something about it. That's what I think is exceedingly important with Zach Wilson.
He's Peter King of NBC Sports. You can follow him on Twitter at Peter_King and read his work at ProFootballTalk.com. One of the other things I wanted to ask you about is, Chris Sims, one of your colleagues, he's been leading this train that Zach Wilson is better than Trevor Lawrence. And he's, joined a few other people. I mean, Mark Schlereth, Joe Theismann have said it. And Chris Sims, even on Friday after Zach's pro day was just like, okay, his tweet was, there's no comparison between his workout and Trevor Lawrence's. And again, going back to your point about pro days, they're going up against air. But you think about the competition that Trevor Lawrence had at Clemson. He played in national championships where Zach, struggled up until his junior season against a weak schedule. Is there anything to that with Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson? Is it a matter of, hey, the Jaguars have to take Trevor just because it's the obvious choice where, to me, I think as a local guy who covers Urban Meyer at the same time as we cover these local guys in the NFL without an NFL team here in Utah, I think about Urban Meyer and Zach Wilson and how fun that could be. but you think about the Jacksonville Jaguars, is it more of just like, hey, it's a smart business decision. We can't go wrong if it's Trevor Lawrence, because even if it doesn't work out, everybody told us that, Trevor Lawrence was the obvious number one pick.
Well, Trevor Lawrence is 34-2 as a college football player at the absolute highest level of the game. He's a big quarterback with an excellent arm. Greg Cosell's opinion, everybody in the NFL respects, thinks he's the closest thing to Andrew Luck since Andrew Luck. So I think this is one of those things, Kyle, where it's beauty in the eye of the beholder. And I also think, comparing pro days, Trevor Lawrence was at a bit of a disadvantage. He had played with a torn labrum in his left shoulder, and he needed to have surgery after that. And if he had said, I don't feel up to snuff, I don't think I can do this, nobody would have said, oh, what a lazy guy or anything. It's admirable that he went to work out for, on, I think it was March 12th, but if he hadn't done it, nobody would have thought anything bad about the guy. So, I don't know which one is better. And I respect the opinions of all, but I don't think it's weird that the no doubt number one quarterback prospect before this season, who went out and had a fantastic year under adverse circumstances, getting COVID, all that stuff. Trevor Lawrence is great. And will Kyle Wilson be better than him? Or Zach Wilson? We'll see. But my feeling about it is that I don't think it's a slam dunk that Trevor Lawrence is any better. I think they're both probably very good, and we'll see what happens.
So you just put out a piece over the weekend for your latest Football Morning in America, where you talked to Urban Meyer about Trevor Lawrence. You asked him, is it any mystery that you're taking Trevor Lawrence? And Urban Meyer essentially said, that's the direction that we're headed down. Should we, at this point in time, stop using the pencil? We need to take out the Sharpie and just, Sharpie Trevor Lawrence in at number one then?
I think so. I thought before I talked to him that there's 95% chance that they were picking him. But after, you got to watch the video too. He's got this little sly look on his face, like, of course we're taking him. What do you think we're doing here?
Yeah.
So they're taking Trevor Lawrence. And And now it looks like, to me anyway, it looks like the Jets will probably take Zach Wilson, unless Joe Douglas, the GM of the Jets, is doing the best best smoke and mirrors job in a while. And who knows? I know someone who I think is the closest person in the NFL to Joe Douglas. And he said Joe is not going to tell a soul who he's picking. He's just not going to do that. So we'll see what happens. And I think one of the things at this time of year, I forget who, somebody was saying the other day that, now that San Francisco is picking third, they know who the Jets are going to pick because they have friends on the Jets staff. Just me personally, I would be shocked if the guys on the Jets staff knew who the Jets were going to pick at number 2. I don't buy it. I don't buy it for a second.
So you mentioned the Niners, they're moving up to 3. And if they had their pick, I mean, let's say that they had anybody in this scenario as far as the quarterback they want to take, probably Lawrence number 1. But after that, do the Niners want, Wilson to fall to them at 3? Do you think Fields or Mac Jones is their guy at 3?
I think Kyle Shanahan would look at Zach Wilson and say, that'd be a great quarterback for us. But, again, I think it's likely, but not certain, based on people I know who are close to that situation, close to the decision-making process. I think it's probably more likely than not that they're going to take Mac Jones. And then we'll see. I mean, there's still 2 really good quarterbacks left if that's how it goes, 1, 2, 3, because, Trey Lance, before this year, there were some, and then before his season, there were some who thought that he was the best of all of them. And then he didn't play other than 1 game and wasn't very good in that 1 game. So, everybody has cooled on him a bit, playing 1 game in the 400 days before the draft. But again, this is all, you've really got to trust your evaluation skills and it's Kyle Shanahan for San Francisco who's going to be making this pick. It's a little bit different situation with the Jets. Joe Douglas is making that pick. Not to say that either person is going to dismiss suggestions, help, whatever. But if I had to guess right now, it goes, Kyle 2, Mac Jones 3, and Trey Lance 4. But, that's all it is. That's a guess.
So you've got a couple quarterbacks there at the beginning. Do you think that there's going to be some more movement as we look, ahead towards the next 3-4 weeks, heading up to the draft at the end of April, where you see some teams, the Carolina Panthers, the New England Patriots, teams that need quarterbacks, try and trade up to be able to get guys like Justin Fields or Trey Lance?
Here's the problem with movement now, okay? The Carolina Panthers would be the obvious team to move. Well, I doubt Atlanta is going to trade with Carolina to give Carolina, a team in its division, its quarterback of the future. I just doubt that would happen. Number 5, Cincinnati is a counterculture team. They hardly ever make trades. So that becomes problematic. And then number 6, the Dolphins traded from 12 to 6 to get, I think, one of these great offensive weapons, either, the tight end from Florida or one of the 3 wide receivers. I just doubt they're, in that situation now, will trade down again, even if they could pick up an extra 1 to do it. So, I don't know. I think I kind of doubt that one of those teams right there, 4, 5, 6, is going to trade. And then you get to 7, the Detroit Lions are not taking a quarterback. So unless somebody trades up with Detroit to take a quarterback ahead of Carolina, and it's possible Carolina could be the team to do that too, to move from 8 to 7 to head off teams at the pass. But, we'll see.
Well, we'll find out in about 30 days from now. We're just under a month now from the NFL draft. He's the one and only, the great Peter King. You can check his work out on ProFootballTalk.com, also NBC Sports. And you can follow him on Twitter at Peter_King. Thanks so much for your time, Peter, and enjoy the next crazy few weeks before we find out where all these guys go.
Hey, really appreciate it, Kyle. All the best to you.